The gospel reading for today is Luke 19, verses 28 through 40. It's found on page 83 in the New Testament section of your Pew Bible. After he had said this, he went on ahead, going up to Jerusalem. And what this is that he said was he gave a parable. Actually, it was a parable regarding the use of talents and gifts. And so after he said this, then he went ahead, going up to Jerusalem. When he had come near Bethphage and Bethany, at the place called the Mount of Olives, he sent two of the disciples, saying, "Go into the village ahead of you, and as you enter it, you will find tied there a colt that has never been ridden. Untie it and bring it here. If anyone asks you, 'Why are you untying it?' just say this, 'The Lord needs it.'" So those who were sent departed and found it as he had told them. As they were untying the colt, its owners asked them, "Why are you untying the colt?" They said, "The Lord needs it." Then they brought it to Jesus, and after throwing their cloaks on the colt, they set Jesus on it. As he rode along, people kept spreading their cloaks on the road. As he was now approaching the path down from the Mount of Olives, the whole multitude of disciples began to praise God joyfully with a loud voice for all the deeds of power that they had seen, saying, "Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord. Peace in heaven and glory in the highest heaven." Some of the Pharisees in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, order your disciples to stop." He answered, "I tell you, if these were silent, the stones would shout out." May the Lord bless this reading of the gospel. Near the football stadium at Mississippi State University, by the way, I have been other places other than Mississippi State. Someday I will share some illustrations from other places I've been. But near the football stadium at Mississippi State, when I was there was an intersection that was known as 5 Points, because 5 roads ran together at that point, which created a very confusing and sluggish convergence of roads. People who were used to the campus did everything they could to avoid having to go through 5 Points. To add to the confusion, 2 of the roads were one-way streets. And to add more to the confusion, in the heart of the convergence were 2 traffic lights, which made for very slow traffic, creating impatience and often error as to which road to choose to get to one's destination, sometime ending up not where you plan to be because you're on the one-way street. I experienced that in Columbus. I'm trying to get to the office yesterday. Because I couldn't get off 71. That's Hudson, and so I went on down a couple of blocks, and then I couldn't figure out. I kept running into one-way streets, going the wrong way. Okay, just let me. Sorry. So then to make things worse is that it seemed that every summer the university would experiment with rerouting their one-way streets. So students would come back expecting the street to be going one way, and it would be rerouted another way. And sometimes it made it into streets that went both ways, and then some streets that went both ways. It was just very confusing intersection. It was commonly called by students, faculty, staff, alums, and visitors as Malfunction Junction. Now sometimes I left at Malfunction Junction, sometime after I left, Malfunction Junction was altered. And they actually took away 3 of the streets, and now there are like 2 streets that come through there, and they've turned that area into the place that most people go to tailgate. And so it's now, but it's still affectionately known as the Junction. This year is my 10th time, my 10th year, to stand before a congregation and call attention to Palm Sunday. In reality, what preachers do is to point at the stories and traditions of our faith and share insights with congregations. And every year, I feel like I am driving through Malfunction Junction, the Malfunction Junction of Jesus' 3 years of ministry, as he heads to the cross and to his crucifixion on Palm Sunday. I have this strange kind of mixture of feelings that comes as a result of the strange kinds of things that were going on. It went on in that story, and were going on in the life of Jesus and the life of Jesus' followers. Perhaps the strangeness I feel is because I know what the week ahead of Jesus is going to be like. Sometimes on Palm Sunday or on this Sunday, the focus is really on the passion of Jesus. And in fact, our neighbors that are now back across the sidewalk, that's during today's service, what they will be doing will be reading all the passages related to Holy Week and the Passion of Jesus and the confrontations and the struggles that Jesus went through during that week. The story portrays a confusing day full of confused people. It seems to be a joyful day, and yet sadness creeps into the festivities. Perhaps, and it looks like a party, but it is a lot like some of the parties we go to today where there's this great political tension. We had friends to come up from Mississippi to have, last Friday, and we ate with them, went out to eat. And probably on both sides, we were hoping nobody talks politics while we're here. The tension that was experienced by the people around Jesus in this time were more intense than the kind of experiences or the kind of feelings we have today. There was in the midst of even within Jesus' inner circle, those that had come from, who had been zealots, and who were probably trying to figure out how do I blend the things that Jesus is teaching me and showing me with this desire and sense of cause that I have to overthrow the Roman government. And then there were others that were saying, oh, let's just keep it quiet and keep it cool, because if we do too much, the Romans are going to come down on us and smash us. And so there was generally always this tension that was brewing, and especially on times of holidays, especially on the Passover week. Perhaps that those following Jesus and standing on the roadside could have really understood who he was and the type of king that he would be, they would not have rejected him by Friday. Because that's what happened, wasn't it? Many of those that had stood on the roadside and had, in Luke it says they put cloaks in front of Jesus as he rode. But in here we have we celebrate with palms, but Luke doesn't mention palms. It's one of the unique things about Luke. But many of those who stood along the road and walked along with Jesus and cheered for Jesus, many of those people were nowhere to be found, or maybe were even those that were yelling for his crucifixion on Friday. If they had seen who Jesus was, they would have known that Jesus' intention was completely different from that of Rome, and that he would be a different kind of king. How did they miss that? How did they miss figuring that out? Because some of these people had been with Jesus for 3 years. An article I read in Feasting on the Gospel, which is a set of commentaries, William Klein says, while the context differs, each of the gospel accounts deals in some sense with the ability to see what God was doing in and through Jesus. It is as if each writer was saying, if you have been paying attention, you will realize what is unfolding before your very eyes. Ancient prophets often used drama and prophetic actions to underline their messages. Jesus used his prophetic action and drama to underline who he was and what he was about. Jesus' ride into Jerusalem on a donkey was a prophetic action and a protest against the dominance power, against Rome. The combined religious political alliance that controlled the lives of the people. It was interesting to me to think about that and to sort of begin to see that Jesus probably had this whole thing set up. That it wasn't that he just said, I think there's a donkey somewhere. You know, go in and they will give you the donkey. You know, that before he came, Jesus probably had this act, this political, religious act set up. He knew that he was going to ride in on a donkey, and he knew that it was going to symbolize something to the people who saw it. When I was younger, I used to think he was more mysterious than that. You know, I used to think that the donkey would be tied up, and here it says it's a colt in this translation. Colt would be tied up, and Jesus has given the disciple instructions to go up and get the colt, and if anybody asks, just tell them that the master has need of the colt. And I thought, wow, that's pretty good, you know. So the disciple is probably feeling a little bit uncomfortable. I certainly would be if I had to go and take somebody's colt away. And so it was almost like I pictured it like a Jedi mind thing, you know. I have need of your colt. Take your colt. Take my colt with you. You know? And but it probably wasn't that way at all. Jesus knew what he was doing. It looks like it probably had been planned. And the colt, probably the owner of the colt knew that Jesus would be asking for it. Consider some of the clues that we see in this procession, in this day of affirmation of Jesus, and see how different Jesus is from the power that was controlling controlled Jerusalem at that time. First of all, if you look at where it started, the procession started. The triumphal parade began from the Mount of Olives. And this matched perfectly with a passage in Zechariah, a passage that many of those who were followers of Jesus and whom others would recognize and would connect with Jesus with this prophetic statement about Zechariah. And it said that God's final intervention would commence. And this point was just really not missed by a lot of them. They understood, okay, here is Jesus. Here is this one who has done miracles and who does miracles. Here is the one who speaks like no one else speaks. And he is beginning this procession from the Mount of Olives, just like it says in Zechariah. Is he bringing this final intervention into the world? And then what the procession really was is another clue as to who Jesus is. Jesus makes his way through the adoring crowd sitting on the back of a colt. And this humble entry offers a stark contrast to the arrival of the powerful military leaders, military leaders that were familiar to the people of Jerusalem. There are no trumpets playing, hail to the chief as Jesus comes in, no royal trappings anywhere in the scene to be seen. Instead, Jesus comes into the royal city on a plain colt. Jesus had planned this demonstration probably, timing it to coincide with the arrival of the Roman legions, brought in for the Passover to quell any threat of rebellion during during this religious and patriotic holiday. So as the Roman centurions were riding in with drums and soldiers and foot soldiers, and they were riding in through one gate, Jesus was probably coming in through another gate. And the contrast would have been so clear that Jesus was different, that his idea of power was different. And the third thing was who was welcome at this procession. Not even the poorest of the poor were held back from this king-like by stiff-armed Secret Service guards. Anyone is welcome to draw near and join the throng praising God at the top of their voices for all of Jesus' miracles they had seen. And then this event also reminded many of them of the time when Judas Maccabeus had defeated the Syrians. It was another time when a conqueror, a rebellious kind of conqueror had come in, and here was Jesus, and the crowd was around him, and it reminded him, and they remembered. This is what is remembered on Hanukkah. And they remembered that Jesus. They saw that Jesus, maybe Jesus is the one who comes to set us free. And the people proclaimed their praises by shouting a version of the words of Psalm 118:26. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Only they said it a little different. They said, blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord. There is the hope. There is the hope that Jesus will be a different sort of king. God's anointed, the culmination of God's patient care. Now Luke seems to tell us that all creation could see what was happening. Wittingly or not, the people received him that day in a fashion that was due. But they would soon lose that enthusiasm for Jesus. In the next chapter, Jesus tells a parable. It's about a master who sends his son, and the people reject the son. Jesus is responding to what he is experiencing as the one who was sent by God, and the threat of death is increasing throughout the week. So some had eyes to see the signs before them, but not the faith to continue when Jesus' enemies the powerful structure combine of religion and Roman government decided that he must die. And they fell away, and some of them not just fell away, but they became the voices that condemned Jesus. So the question for us is, will we see what God wants us to see when we look at Jesus? Will we join all creation shouting for joy? Or will we maintain for a while, but pull away for convenience or for power? What will we do with Jesus? Not today, but what will we do with Jesus on Monday? That's the question. It's not when we come here, but it's when we go there. Do we remember who we have seen here when we're out there?